Hi guys, the Metal Maniac back again, and in this video I'm going to be listing off my top 5 favorite British metal bands. So let's just get into it. So at number 5 is Angel Witch. Angel Witch is sort of one of the underdogs when it comes to the new wave of British heavy metal and just British metal as a whole, really. They sort of got pushed to the side by because of bands like Iron Maiden, Judas Priest, Saxon. All those all those bands got really really big. Angel Witch kind of unfortunately didn't have that much success. Especially when they sort of changed their vocalist. Like the main vocalist and guitarist stayed in the band, but he stopped doing vocals for quite a while. They brought in someone else, and then he wasn't too good. But later on, like years later, actually, but later on, even though it was years later, the replacement vocalist left. Then the guy who originally did vocals and guitar, even though he's still there, like he stepped up and did the vocals again. Kevin Hayborn, that's his name. But yeah, their early stuff is really, really good. I'd say like one of their newer albums is pretty decent, but their older stuff is like just absolutely fantastic. This album is fantastic for the most part. Their first two demos from 1978 and 1979 are fantastic, and then the 3-track EP called Loser is also fantastic. Angel Witch has sort of a sort of mainstream heavy metal kind of vibe and sound, although they never go too far with it for the most part. They sort of they have their sort of like traditional straightforward heavy metal and then especially on a couple, let's say maybe like Atlantis, something in like the chorus. The choruses of certain songs definitely are sort of kind of like mainstreamy sort of sing along, not sing along, but they're more melodic and stuff. Definitely made to be singles. In fact, they were a lot of these songs with the catchy choruses were singles. But yeah, they're still really good. Kevin Hayborn is such an underrated vocalist. He could do very high vocals. He could do sort of the more like toned down, sort of just mid range. He could even do some, not say he's gruff, but like he could do some like sort of slightly more raspy vocals. With songs like Baphomet and stuff like that. But yeah, he's not too, his range of vocals is not too wide, but like he could do quite a couple of different sort of styles, even all at once, and one like going through all his different sort of things in like one song as well. But the band also has, of course, Kevin Hayborn as the guitarist, and there's a drummer and a bass player. The band for the most part for the longest time was pretty much just three guys. Yeah. If I were to recommend their stuff from them, I'd say again this full length self titled album. Their first two demos that are actually on a compilation album now called 70s Tapes, and then the Loser EP. Yeah, Angel Witch, fantastic. Just a shame that they didn't get the recognition they deserve. And it's also a shame that they kind of had a sort of like a rough history with lineup changes and other technical problems. But anyway, number 4. Number 4 is Grim Reaper. Yeah, another band that had a lot of like problems. This time they had a lot of this band. This band had a lot of problems with studios and stuff. They had a lot of like studios that basically screw them over in the long run. Like people, the studio people stealing money and stuff like that, and just a whole controversy with a couple of the studios that they were signed to, that they had no idea what was going on at the time. Yeah, even though they didn't put out much, they put out a couple of demos three full length albums, and that's it. Yeah, sure. Steve Grimmett's Grim Reaper was connected in a way that Steve Grimmett was still a vocalist, but that's a completely different band and shouldn't be lumped in with the classic Grim Reaper band. A completely different band, but anyway, their first album is fantastic. Second album is shit. And then their third album is, in my opinion, the best one. They also put out a couple of, like I said, a couple of demos. Although most of the demos aren't too memorable, but although I highly recommend you check out their debut demo called "Bleed 'Em Dry," where they had a completely different vocalist and it was sort of more of a sort of hard rock style, but it was on the edge of being heavy metal in certain songs. That album's that demo is super underrated. And I think is probably maybe even their second best thing they ever released, just behind this album. But anyway, yeah, this band has some amazing, just sort of classic heavy metal sound to it. And I'd say probably some of their best songs are even on this album, like Rocky to Hell, Night of the Vampire, Lust for Freedom, Rock Me Till I Die. But then, of course, their most famous song, of course, is the title track of their first album, See You in Hell, which is, I gotta say, one of the best songs ever recorded, in my opinion. Not just in terms of metal, but as music as a whole. Yeah, Grim Reaper, awesome band, in at number 4. Number 3. Number 3 is Venom. Venom, of course, is sort of hard to categorize about where they are in the spectrum of metal. They have, of course, they have, the punk influence, the traditional heavy metal influence, so many different musical influences. They're sort of hard to put into one category. And even in sort of the metal, scene as a whole, yes, they're part of the new wave of British heavy metal, but they're also part of the beginnings of the first wave of black metal. They were just basically everywhere at the time, especially with their first, 2 albums and maybe even first live album. But yeah, Venom inspired a lot of bands going forward, black metal, even some death metal, or even thrash. Yeah, their first 2 albums, of course, are iconic, but I also love their first live album, The 7 Days of Hell. Their album, what is it called? Something Before the Storm or something. God, I can't remember the name of that one. I haven't listened to it in a while, but I need to go back and listen. I need to get it. Calm Before the Storm. That's it. Calm Before the Storm is also really good. Their second album with their replacement vocalist is also really good. And then the reunion album is fantastic as well, Cast in Stone, which I still need to get that one as well. Yeah, as for their best time period, I'd probably say their first 2 full-length albums, and then their first live album, and then a couple of their singles as well. Yeah, just a very influential band, and just is one of the very few bands at the time that not only was like influential, but it was influential to so many different aspects of metal. Again, so many different genres of metal came from this band. So many different, metal scenes came from this band. But yeah, just an absolutely fantastic band, and I love most of their albums. Actually, there's a couple that aren't too good, but most of their discography is super good, and also a lot of their later stuff is super underrated as well. But yeah, Venom is at number 3. Number 2, Judas Priest. Yeah, Judas Priest is one, I think maybe the second or third traditional heavy metal band I ever sort of discovered. And yeah, they are amazing, whether it be with Rob Halford or Ripper Owens. Judas Priest is fantastic. And I love most of their, stuff, their 70s era, Sad Wings of Destiny and not Sin After Sin. Hellbent for Leather, aka Killing Machine. Those two albums are fantastic. Most of their '80s albums are really good. I'd say pretty much. I'd say with the exception of let's see. With the exception of Screaming for Vengeance and Point of Entry, I'd say most of their '80s stuff is fantastic as well. Their '90s stuff is also really good. Jugulator with Tim Ripper Owens debut album is fantastic. Demolition is okay, but I'd say if you want to stick to the Ripper Owens stuff, I'd say mainly check out, like, if you must go to the Ripper Owens, or if you want to check it out, I'd say probably this album and then '98 Live Meltdown. But yeah, even their reunion era with their Rob Halford reunion era, from uh Angel of Retribution onwards is that era is fantastic as well. Like, there's very few albums in this band's discography that I can say are bad. They've done a very good job with consistency, and even when they change their sound and style from time to time, the consistency is still there, but not maybe in the musical style, but in the quality of content. Like, for the most part, I'd say, they've put out like most. One of the bands that has put out the most quality, consistent releases. Like, again, even when they change styles, the consistency of the absolutely fantastic quality of their music is amazing. Um, Now, as for my opinion in terms of who do I like more, Ripper Owens or Rob Halford, I've said this many times. I do like Rob Halford's vocals, and he's a great vocalist, and I think he's great. But honestly, I kind of prefer Tim Ripper Owens. He kind of has a bit more power behind his vocals than Rob Halford. And I know that might shock a lot of people, but whatever. I even have the Sermons of the Sinner album that has Tim Ripper Owens on vocals, and of course KK Downing on guitar. I can't wait for the second album, the KK's Priest album. Yeah, I'm surprised that it didn't get. I mean, I guess it got a fair amount of coverage when it was released, but honestly, it seems like the hype for it has died down to the point, so low, to the point where I think it might have just been like some weird trend that, oh look, this album with the ex Judas Priest guitarist is out, let's praise it and then like forget about it when it's not relevant anymore. Anyway, I'm rambling, but yeah, Judas Priest is just one of those bands that no matter if they change their sound or whatever, I'd say 98% of the time, the quality of their content totally makes up for their sort of inconsistency with the ever-changing sound. And then finally, at number one, my favorite British metal band of all time. I guess this would probably be obvious for most people who've been watching my channel for a while now. Iron Maiden. Yeah, Iron Maiden. Not only is my favorite British metal band, but is my favorite metal band of all time. Now, uh, there's so much debate of whether, the Paul Di'Anno era is better, the Bruce Dickinson era is better. Honestly, if someone asked me, I like both. Although I will say that some later Bruce Dickinson stuff, the last couple of albums, is really hit or miss. Like the more recent stuff, his vocals usually aren't too good, and the production's kind of shit. But as for in terms of how Paul Di'Anno's vocals matured over time, and how he's doing now currently compared to back then, sure, he's not in the band anymore, but he outside of Maiden, he's actually put out some really good material. The self-titled Di'Anno album, even though it's not metal, it's still fantastic. The Gog Magog EP is fantastic. The stuff he did with the band, crap, I forgot the name of it. I think two albums. But I know I'm blanking on the name at the moment. But it's sort of like a punky heavy metal kind of thing. Um, yeah, I don't know why I can't remember the name of it at the moment, but he did really good with that band. Battlezone, that's what I'm thinking of. Paul Di'Anno's Battlezone. I don't know why I blanked on that, but that was a great one. But yeah, both vocalists are really good. I don't prefer one or the other for the most part, unless I'm in a very specific mood that I want to listen to just one era of the band at one point. But um, yeah, Number of the Beast is my favorite album. Yeah, sure, it's probably um I guess cliche at this point to say that this is my favorite album because a lot of people, most people would say that this is their favorite album, but honestly, it's a great album. But oh, also this is actually an original U.S. edition. But yeah, that's why the coloring is different. I know most people are used to the darker version. That's the from the previous couple re-releases in recent years, but yeah, those were re-releases for the most part. The audio is so shit. Like it's like something. I don't know. It sounds like they just dragged the audio through the mud. It's just so everything's so buried in the mix. But yeah, the original version is fantastic. As well as the most recent re-release, actually, with the live over Hammersmith live album that came with it. But anyway, I'm rambling again. Iron Maiden again is another band, kind of like with Judas Priest for the most part. I'd say maybe it's a slightly lesser extent, but like most of the stuff that they put out, even though if they change style, I'd say they're probably actually more consistent in style. Overall, just playing the same style than Judas Priest. Although there have been times where some albums are slightly like the Di'Anno albums are slightly more punkish. The newer albums are slightly more sort of experimental, but for the most part, they've kept consistency in both the quality of just the overall quality and the quality and the not quality but the sound and style of their music. But yeah, absolutely fantastic band, and they're my number one favorite British metal band. All right, that's it for this video. Hope you guys enjoyed, and I will see you all next time.